All right, everyone, I'm here to remind you that impeachment is still a thing, but none of you actually care. You see how quickly that dropped off the radar in the wake of the Democrats deciding it was a bad idea. And in other news, Trump's approval now topping 45%. It's 45.3 currently in the RCP aggregate, which ties mid-September. And other than that, it's the highest it has been since within a month of him taking office. Yeah, his approval has spiked, partially because of impeachment and possibly because of the Iran thing, although keep in mind, the polling period is prior to that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gains support in the wake of slaughtering Soleimani, but we've got to wait and see. His approval could drop like a rock over the next couple of weeks. We have to wait and see. But it has been positively impacted by impeachment, probably by the good economy, generally speaking. It's funny because now they're saying, well, what were they saying? Economic growth won't top something like 3 or 3.5%. Oh, doomsday basically is upon us. It's like, Obama would have killed for some of the numbers that Trump's been posting for the last few years. The idea that you need constant sustained growth at China levels in order for the economy to be doing fairly well is wrong anyway. The fact that Trump's likely to be reelected is why the stock market's still doing well. It looks like he's going to lose and we're going to have a President Elizabeth Warren, and you can look forward to half of the country's wealth being wiped out overnight anyway as people flee. I know I would consider it. I'd be like, yeah, maybe the Dutch tax rate isn't so bad after all. Look at what Bernie Sanders is proposing. Keeping in mind, of course, he wasn't born in the state of Vermont, so we get a pass on that one. He's actually a New Yorker. He's like Michael Bloomberg or something, basically. He's from Brooklyn. Keep this in mind. Impeachment backfired very quickly for the Democrats. The problem is this. They've got no proper way forward. Pelosi began impeachment largely because she was goaded by the far left, which in turn was goaded by Trump. She brought up the possibility vaguely of impeachment months prior. She had said at the time, and you'll remember this was widely reported, well, we're not going to impeach him unless we really, really think that we got a reason. There's a high threshold, because it would be divisive, it'd be problematic, and we've got all these platforms, we want to discuss healthcare and all this shit, and it would distract from that. So that's a last resort. Within just a month, AOC and all of her cronies had pressured her into starting impeachment inquiries in the unofficial sense. That's because Trump very wisely said, hey, they've opened the can of worms by even mentioning the possibility of impeachment. I'm going to wheedle and antagonize and see if I can get this going. Trump's not worried about impeachment. He doesn't seem to be. His approval doesn't seem to be either. He's very happy about the fact that the House has effectively impeached him. His approval has risen, exactly like I predicted. Exactly like any sane person understood would be the case, just like after Clinton was impeached. Because now Trump is fundamentally being compared to the U.S. House. That's a great thing to be compared to because their approval tends to hover in the teens. At best, it hits 20 or 22 on a good day. Nancy Pelosi's approval level is consistently a good 10 points below Trump's, and his is inching its way upwards at the moment. Yeah, he's still got relatively high disapproval numbers, but 45 is survivable. It's getting up towards the magic 47 that every pundit wrongly claims you have to be at to be reelected anyway. No, you don't. You have to be at about 45, which he already is at. You have to be at 45 and your opponent has to suck. Show me a Democrat that doesn't suck within the field right now. Bernie bros aside, okay, you love your magical old socialist dude who promises you the moon on a stick. Well, you're not going to get it. Bernie Sanders is probably going to get schlonged. If he's not, he'd lose in a spectacular fashion. All of the neoliberal pundits comprehend this. You're just too young and idealistic to understand how politics really works. I hate to put it that way, but when people don't understand anything about politics, they think that magical socialist dude is going to wave a magic wand and make free ice cream appear. That's not the way the world works. Be interesting to see what happened with the U.S. economy when you suggest driving all major businesses out of the country with excessive taxation. Be very interesting. Impeachment is still on, but you're hearing less about it. I wonder why. Could it be because for the same reason the legacy media stops talking about polling every time that Trump is polling higher? They never mention the Rasmussen polls, which overestimate his support. Let's, be entirely clear there. They would rather mention the one cherry-picked poll in an aggregate, whether it's Gallup or MSNBC or Fox, doesn't make any difference, that shows him with the lowest possible number. Trump's approval falls to 32%. Cenk Uyghur's polling firm says so. It's very funny. This is the sort of cherry-picking that prefaced 2012 and Karl Rove's meltdown, or 2016 and Nate Silver's meltdown, or the last election and the meltdown of certain independent creators that I won't mention who thought that the Democrats were going to lose in a much more spectacular fashion, and somehow the Republicans would have control of the House right now, which never actually occurred. Interesting times when impeachment, which should be top-page news, has been all but disappeared. People would rather talk about the so-called non-existent wall that actually is being built, that's propaganda, or about Soleimani, as though that has, specific relevance. Dude, the U.S. kills people like him every single week. Drone strikes are common. We've been conducting them by the thousands every year for a very long time. Where was people's outrage? Where was the outrage years ago? It's because it's feigned outrage now. But it's hip in the news cycle because the Democrats definitely don't want you fixating on impeachment. It's lost support almost continuously since it began. Nancy Pelosi's next step, of course, was an unofficial inquiry. At the time, it was just a bunch of Democrats talking to the so-called whistleblower. Trump pressured them, and McConnell especially, pressured them into making it official so that there could be cross-examination. They wanted to keep it unofficial. I guarantee you, Pelosi and the other, let's call them, for want of a better term, strategically sane liberals, they never wanted to impeach. They never wanted an official inquiry into impeachment. They never wanted official hearings. They never wanted trial testimony. They never wanted to call witnesses. They just wanted to gather around with Shifty Schiff and all these other people, talk to a whistleblower we don't even identify, although we probably know who he is. We're not allowed to discuss it on YouTube. You can see his name everywhere else, though, because it's a fucking public record. Talk to him or her or them or whatever, and then release selective material in a pithy form that the news cycle could then gobble up and spit out ad nauseum. Made for great propaganda as long as it was an unofficial inquiry. Even then, though, the popularity for the concept wasn't that high. And when people realized how legalistic and boring and slow the process was, and how obviously partisan and what a sham it was, they quickly lost even more support. I expect that at some point, belatedly, obviously, at this point, the Senate will take it up and they'll acquit Trump, and, that'll be that. The Democrats don't want that either. It almost remains to be seen if they're going to send the articles of impeachment ever over to the Senate. They might just fucking sit on them for fucking ever. That's about all. Peace out.